So I want to talk about something that's been on my mind for a while. And this question that keeps coming up, especially with people that are getting into relationships with people, that are very questionable. And you think, why is that person with this person when one of them is really toxic? And why do they keep putting up with it? Why do people, you know, accept this type of love? It's like the movie Perks of Being a Wallflower, where he asked, like, why are people like this? Why do people get into these very toxic relationships that they shouldn't be in? And, the teacher says people accept the love they think they deserve. And I think that is very, very insightful, very real, very true. Even, it's very real. Like I have a lot of friends and people that I know of that are in these relationships, like that are not well suited for them, that they shouldn't be in, or like past relationships that they've been in that were extremely toxic, including myself. Like I had a friend who was with this guy who would basically it was like an online relationship, and he would keep cyberbullying her like all the time, even though like she could just turn off the phone, turn off the laptop. She kind of kept, like answering the texts, picking up the call from him, and he would like be really rude, even though she knew like he was gonna be really rude. She'd like pick up anyway, and she'd like, kind of giving into it almost. But yeah, with a lot of time and a lot of support from people, she's no longer in that relationship. But it makes you think, like why do people put themselves in these positions? And it's true, like people accept the love they think they deserve, from other people. It can stem back to childhood, and the way they were treated by especially parental figures, which is a huge factor in, like choosing your partner. When you see how your parents are with each other, or if they were there or not, and how that manifests in your life later on in partnerships, like stuff that you've been through, like childhood trauma, stressors, and everything like that, like impact relationships. And a lot of people I think that I've come across or have gotten to know and just seen like in the media online, a lot of people just kind of like they push and repress a lot of memories from childhood, or like they don't want to think about what happened, or like do any healing work towards kind of bettering themselves or bettering like how they are in relationships. And that usually manifests into something. It can be toxic depending on who you're with, like partner wise. And you see it like happen time and time again. You kind of have to realize that before you get into relationships, you need to do a lot of healing and a lot of work. And therapy works if, not everyone's going to be able to afford therapy. You can always journal and write down how you're feeling, which always, helps. And like do a lot of thinking and understand like where you're coming from, and understand like maybe why you're thinking this way. A lot of people don't do the work. A lot of people repress those emotions that come up for them. And I think, like when you don't deal with that, then get into a relationship without dealing with past traumas, past like stressors or stuff that are coming up immediately, and you like get into this relationship, it can be toxic. It can be, something that is not suited for you, and it's okay to leave. And I think a lot of people have trouble with the fact of letting go. And of course, like I have still some of those issues today, but letting go, I think, is a huge factor in like why do we stay into these relationships that are toxic, or why do we stay in these relationships that are not suited for us. And we have to let go. We have to realize that there are better people out there that will treat you way better and that will see you for who you are and be patient and kind and loving. Because not everyone out there is suited to deal with everyone's, who they are as a person. And that's okay. And sometimes you kind of have to realize that it's not always, relationships are not always just about love. They're about compatibility and how you guys work together and overcoming, your own issues together and like working on it together in a very healthy way. But that's not always going to happen, and you have to let go. And it is a very hard thing to do, of course. Like letting go is really hard, and letting go is, I think, so many people struggle with that. And people that don't struggle with that have either learned to let go and gone through their own healing process, or I think there are some people out there that like are still they're very like they hide their feelings, or they don't want to feel that way, so they like purge into like binge drinking or like drugs, like substance abuse, or like their work, some type of like addictive behavior. But yeah, so how do we let go? I think the process in letting go is, I think for me, journaling helps so much. Talking to people really helps. Trusted like friends and family around you. Like writing your feelings out, writing like about the relationship, or writing about everything that you need to get out down on the paper. Yeah, and just kind of realizing that if you're with a person that is not compatible or toxic or just like many other reasons, then you kind of have this nagging feeling inside, like I shouldn't be with them. There's something, but I don't know what it is. And like like figure out what that is. Like write it down. Talk to friends. Do some research of how you're feeling. Like listen to that. And sometimes a lot of people don't listen to that, and they end up in these very like they even marry someone that's really toxic, and they end up in these like situations, and you have to be smart not not to do that, and you could end up like married or have kids with them. Yeah, you don't want that. So you have to realize that this person you're with, if you're with them, if you've been with them for a long time and you're like, I want to like be with them long term, you have to realize that it's never going to change. A lot of people don't change unless they put the work into it themselves, and you actively see them putting in the work. And if you actively see them putting in the work, then you're like, okay, like this can, we can work on this together. But if they're not actively putting in the work, they're never going to change. And I think from like my experience and a bunch of friends' experiences, men specifically, I think don't change, especially like younger men. Maybe like you obviously not every single guy, but there are a few ones out there that will change and will actually do the work. But a lot of men, they don't be changing. They don't want to be doing the work. It's you kind of have to tap into a lot of emotional vulnerability and be very open with a person. And I think a lot of men in this day and age struggle with that, and that's also something to work on. But you have to be with a person that's like open and willing to work on this like emotional vulnerability, and like like digging in deep. And I feel like a lot of these young men out there, especially with like the whole red pill masculinity, like content you see online, it's hard for them to like open up, be vulnerable. Like, how do you actually feel about this? Yeah, like don't stay with Ben or anyone that is giving you like a hard time, and you've talked to them again and again, you've communicated with them, and you've told them your feelings, and you know they're never going to treat you better. Even if you ask a million times, they will never change. Yeah, like from personal experience, I was with the person for a while, and I kept asking them to actually be more consistent with plans or more consistent with time and stuff like that, like showing up on time. And they never really did. And then it kind of got to a point where I was like, they're not going to change and they're not putting any effort into changing. So, and also it's kind of a sign of disrespect if they're not like, you know, putting in the effort to change, especially if they're like hurting you. If you've explained that they're, you know, hurting you, they're wasting your time, your effort, like emotional, you know, like your emotional feelings towards this, and like you've kind of it's a lot, like you put a lot of like emotion and kind of like you put that when you put a lot of emotion into these relationships, and you get nothing back and you continuously ask again and again and you're not getting anything, or like you ask and they change a little bit but then they go back to old habits, they're not changing. They're not changing. Like it's very rare. And you kind of have to set boundaries for yourself. You're like, if they pass this boundary, then like we should, you know, we can't be together. But what I see a lot of times happening is like people don't have these boundaries, and they don't, and they find it hard to set boundaries, especially with partners. But you have to respect yourself. Respect yourself, women. Like respect yourself. Like treat yourself with kindness. Treat yourself with love. And I think I forgot who said this, but someone said, when you're with a partner, imagine if you had a child and that child was dating someone like your partner. Would you still, you know, would you like that for them? Like, would you be like, wow, that's, you know, great partner, you should still be with them? Or would you be like, wow, this is terrible, I don't want my kid to be with someone like this ass? Um, so you kind of have to look at it from that point of view, because sometimes, you know, a lot of people don't always look at themselves and they're like from third person, and they're not like, people need to give themselves grace, people need to give themselves more kindness. You're owed that. You deserve someone who is kind, who is honest, who has a lot of humility, who is consistent, who is caring, who is loving. You know, of course you want those qualities in a partnership. Who doesn't? Like at the end of the day, that's what everyone wants. Like humans, for, you know, you can take it back to evolutionary standpoints where humans have forever been, you know, in need of partnership because that's how we survived, you know? So, of course, that's what everyone wants at the end of the day. And you have to realize that you want better for yourself. You can't just be sitting here and be like, oh, I'm waiting for the, like, when they're going to change, I'm waiting, you know, they're going to, I know that they're going to. Or, like, you have this expectation that they will, like, one day. Because at the end of the day, it's very rare that they do. And save yourself a lot of crying, save yourself a lot of, like, you know, like, just a lot of emotional hurt and kind of, like, being so disappointed by it all the time. Because I remember being just so disappointed all the time because, and that kind of takes out a lot of, just a lot of energy for me. Like, why would you waste your time and energy on someone who can't even respect you and respect the things that you do? And that's the thing with people that like ask these simple tasks, like, oh, can you, like be more consistent, or oh, can you actually, like plan dates, or oh, like I want to feel more like loved in this way. And if they're not showing up for you, and that's the thing, if they're not showing up for you, you know, like, why would you put effort into something that you're not getting anything back? And I'm not saying relationships have to be transactional, because that is not true. Everyone has to put in a little bit of effort for it to work. But I'm just saying, if you see no effort and it's a consistent no effort thing, then obviously, like, save your losses, save your energy, just cut it off. There's so many better people out there that are suited for you that will, you know, give you that form of intimacy. It doesn't always have to be like sex intimacy, but invest in a lot of friendships, invest in like maybe your pets, spend time with your animals, your family, and that's very important. It's not just about sex, and it's not just about like being in a relationship with someone. Like humans need intimacy within friendships and families as well. And I think a lot of the time now, especially now with everyone being so much on their phone and so much like within the internet and whatever, it's harder to find that kind of like outside intimacy other than relationships. But we have to, find a community of friends, like join a book club, like join a running club. Um, yeah. So how do people? I feel like when do you realize you're at that point in the relationship where you're like, this isn't like really good. This isn't okay. Like why should I shouldn't be in this relationship anymore. I think when you get to that point, you start. It's probably like again like that voice in the back of your head where you're like I shouldn't be with this person. There's something about it that's like just not right, Probably like not reminiscing, but you're kind of pondering on that for like a while, and you've pondered on that for a really long time until like one day you're just like, wow. You kind of look at yourself, you're like, wow, how did I get myself in this position? And I feel like usually what happens is what you see in relationships is one person it's like, oh, I want you to change and do this, and the other person's like, okay, I will, and they give them like little breadcrumbs to like eat up, like, oh, like I'll give you flowers one time and then never again, or like once every like 6 months or whatever, even though you asked for them for like a little bit more, because they're only like literally $3 to $6 at store, and if you want the nice ones obviously they're more expensive, but even like the little ones, come on guys. And so you can't just be like falling for the breadcrumbs and being, yeah, like, oh my god, like he's changed so much. Like, girl, no, he ain't gonna do that. If he ain't doing that now, he ain't doing that ever. Especially like at the beginning stages of the relationship. If he ain't doing it, then he will not be doing it ever. Yeah, so you kind of like, if you talk to them about it like multiple times and they haven't changed, if the thing in your head's like, oh, we shouldn't be with this person, like this is actually kind of toxic and bad, then yeah, like I would be like thinking about maybe ending the relationship. Yeah, and of course there are obviously red flags people need to look out for in relationships, and not everyone's going to like see them, because it's hard, because like I said before, people accept the love they think they deserve, and that's mostly stems from childhood. So when people don't see these red flags is because sometimes they're used to those red flags because of childhood situations. For example, if you grew up in a very abusive household, with someone who is yelling all the time or physically abusive, and then usually like when you're with someone you don't notice the red flags because you're so used to that from your childhood that you're like, oh, this is like normal. But then you get yourself into a situation where you're like, wow, okay, like this is escalated so far and I need to get out of this relationship. And I think one thing we can do is obviously look for those red flags before they start and do the healing work. And that's why you have to, well, as RuPaul said, like you have to love yourself before you love anyone else. Like, and that is the truth. That is the truth. So do the work and make sure you're happy and healthy before getting into relationships, because you do not want to, end up in a very toxic relationship where you're like, wow, like, well, why am I here? How did I get this far? Like, and they kept like pushing the boundaries, and it's not what you want. I think more like people need to stand up. They need to stand up. They need to get out of these relationships. Like, why are you in them? Obviously, like a lot of people have to find it out on their own. They don't always see the red flags when they come up, and when they do, sometimes they choose to ignore them because maybe it's the easiest thing for them to do. And that's okay, but yeah, like I knew this person who I don't know, dated someone for a year, and then they got engaged within the year, and they I don't think they got married. Wait, yeah, they got engaged, and then they went down to a different country, and he got a house for her and everything, and she was living in the house for like a couple months, and then he was cheating on her with another woman, and he kicked her out of the house, and then she was basically homeless because she had no finances of her own, and he controlled all the finances. He got that house in his name, and they weren't even married. So that's very dangerous. So obviously there were probably red flags, like getting married within a year, and they're like still pretty young. Like, what are you doing? Um, Obviously no hate to people that do that, but that was obviously a little bit of a red flag. Um, yeah. So I think it's big. Obviously, have your own finances set aside. Not be completely not financially independent, because those things happen where you're left in a different country and you have no money and you're homeless because stuff happens. Shit happens, and they could cheat on you. They could do some like crazy shit. They could like, it's it's insane. Like sometimes you don't know who people are until like something happens, and it's insane. So please get your money up and not your funny up. Be financially independent. Um, and just be aware. Be aware. You can't just go through life not being financially independent. Like this whole kind of trad wife thing now is, it's like the new trend. You to be like Nora Smith. Oh, I want like him to pay for everything. We're gonna have 1,000 babies, and they're basically getting rich off of you, and your kind of stupidness of having no financial independence. And then when he cheats on you with another woman, and leaves you homeless in another country, then obviously that's not fun. Like, you don't want to be in that position. Like, don't put yourself in those positions. Like, be smart. Be smart with like what you do in life, because I feel like a lot of people go through life and they think there's no consequences to their actions because maybe they're not used to them. Maybe they've never had a consequence before. But there are tons of consequences that happen on real life things. Like, yes, like be careful who you build your life with, especially with long-term relationships like marriage, and choosing your like the father of your children. And yeah, so just be careful. When you have to learn to let go, and that's why before we get, when you see the red flags, you gotta let go and be like, this isn't serving me anymore. This is being disrespectful. Like, do not fold for the silly things of just like a good morning text, or just like a like, oh, he brought me flowers one time. Like, it needs to be more than that. Like, come on. Like, just because you can't just look at how you're feeling. You have to be like, oh, do they like me as well, rather than being like, oh my gosh, like I like them so much. um yeah, so just treat yourself. You have to love yourself before you can love anybody else.